Ben Kaplan, look at us. We are in person. In the initial notice, we said we were going to be from a Canna Cabana. We couldn't make it down there this morning on King Street, but you were so gracious to come here.
Oh, I appreciate the invitation. Stoked to be here.
We've circled each other for a long time. And then do you remember the first time we actually met? It's like the most COVID story ever.
Tell me that we weren't in line at the Shoppers
We
Drug.
were getting our COVID tests to go to MJ Biz 2021. That sound right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that was a historic trip.
Yeah, and then we needed the test to get back to. We had to find a test center in Las Vegas. It was like,
oh man,
so COVID-y.
Yeah, those memories are like basically exercised out of my mind.
I know, but it happened to be the same Shoppers Drug Mart, which is, if for those watching that are not here, are like CVS, Walgreens, except almost more pervasive than those two things in Toronto, certainly. Ben, you wrote, I'm going to call it what will be the definitive book on the launch of legal cannabis in Canada. What are the seeds of the book? Like, what were your thoughts? Like, it was 5 years ago, like, God, someone should be capturing this story.
It's interesting, man. Like, as soon as I got in on it, I walked into a Lyft event in like 2016 and I felt like, oh my God.
There's a thing going on.
There's a thing going on.
Yeah.
Big money. And it's weed.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God. I was like, each of these things were more fascinating than the next.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And I just glommed onto it.
And you are a writer and a runner by trade.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
And so do you look at everything and say there's a story here that is just amazing?
1,000,000,000%. I mean, I've been a writer, like I've been like a kind of a gun for hire, like writing just from like since like 96. I mean, I guess I got out of school in 96 and
We're exactly the same age.
Yeah, man. I mean,
old.
I always have a pen. I always have a pen and paper in my pocket. I mean, I love doing it. Like I know for a fact on my deathbad, I'm going to like shoot 400 words to the Toronto Star. Like I always do it.
I love it.
You know, and then I said with this, it was like, it was just so rich, so rich.
And what, and I got the beginning and I read the beginning a little teeny bit. You sent me a nice little advanced copy, a little bit. One thing is like, it was weed, it was Canada, it was interesting, and it was like super fun. But the personalities behind it and the leaders behind it really made it even more enticing. Yeah.
I mean, dude, and the other thing you have to recognize is because a lot of time I do celebrity stuff. Like when I was at the National Post for a lot of years, I'd be doing like Justin Bieber or Katy Perry or whatever, because I was writing about music.
Right.
And like, so you're dealing with like 20 layers of publicists and things. And yeah, I have 7 minutes with Mandy Moore.
Right.
So that's one thing.
It's pretty good, by the way. 7 minutes with Mandy Moore. Sounds like
porno.
Well, I was going to say it sounds like an Entourage episode, but yeah, we'll stick to,
Anyway, the point was Aurora, when I was in Vancouver and I was meeting with Aurora, and I don't know if they were yet at their $15 billion evaluation, but let's just call it for shits and giggles. Let's say it was at $8 billion.
Right.
And the investors relations was a Gmail account.
Right.
I was like, these dudes are just they're accessible, you know? And I was like, because that's what you need as a storyteller.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because not a dissimilar time, I entered the Canadian cannabis landscape probably mid 2017. We were starting what is to become Business of Cannabis, and that was the amazing part, was that everything we just talked about, like there was an amazing story to tell. There were incredible people to talk to. You had access to them, and something was certainly brewing. And I thought the part that was really interesting is like nobody knew all of them, and they didn't necessarily know each other. So there wasn't like this connective tissue, which I think Lyft played a big role. I hope sort of Business of Cannabis did too. But it was people like you who were like going between and among them that were like sort of relaying stories back and forth about what was happening in each sort of part of the sector.
You know, Mateo Oleru, who's coming tonight to the party, and he started Lyft. Yeah. He was like my first thing. I guess this was 2016. So I walked into Lyft and I was like, wow,
what's going on here? Yeah.
This is chocolate. This is, I walked into Oz. Yeah. and Mateo, so I went out to Vancouver to follow him, and this was for Sharp magazine. And he goes, what we are is risk takers having the time of our lives. And I was like, wow. And that's always sort of been my rubric, you know, and I guess kind of that's what I am. Yeah. You know, like
I see that.
Yeah. So again, I just sunk my teeth in like a dog with a stick.
And it was, and And it'll never be like that again, right? Sort of 2016 to
yeah.
2018, say, or even 2019,
19.
as things start rolling out on sort of the retail cannabis front. It was amazing to sort of have a front row seat or even be part of it.
Yeah.
But like, what struck you? Like, what are the through lines that you sort of follow in the book that sort of help tell the story?
Well, I will never forget this. A big through line is, and like an interesting thing about that time. I remember I was at the Army Run. So Hexo was based in Gatineau, Quebec. Yeah. And I was at the Army Run.
Formerly Hydropothecary.
Yeah, man, old school.
I was a patient. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Well, they were. What caught me was a story they published that they had a patient who wanted those things to be certified kosher. Okay. And so they got a kosher certification, which I was like, well, that seems interesting. And the plant is kosher anyway, and the facilities. So it was like, that was an interesting story. I was like, oh, I'll become a patient.
Those guys aren't Jewish.
No.
But the guy told me at the Army Run, their director of marketing, I can't remember his name right now, but he had mentioned to me something like that. Say you're selling a candy bar, and the candy bar costs $2.50. If you sold that candy bar to a cannabis company, they would pay $25,000 for the candy bar because they had more money than they knew what to do with. And that always struck me as like such a specific thing, the cannabis tax.
Yeah. Well, that's a good example, and a not great one is that there are brand new 1 million square foot greenhouses owned by some of the companies you just mentioned that are not growing cannabis right now, or never did.
I have a killer story. I have a story coming out in the Toronto Star, which is so about that. You could buy $110 million facility for $10 million and get included with all of the stuff.
Well, I'm going to one tomorrow that falls into that category. That's actually in the Greater Toronto area in Vaughan. And it's unbelievable. Yeah. Everything is new. Everything is beautiful. And there's still the initial people stuff in the building.
100%. The vaults back in the day would cost $1 million.
Yes. Yeah. And now they hold like coffee pot, like it's like storage, not cannabis storage, just regular storage. No, I remember, and you'll remember this too. This is how crazy it was. On one day, there was this requirement, a Health Canada requirement to have this vault. Yeah. That was like a bank. Yeah. And then the next day it wasn't. Yeah. But the people that finished their facility, got licensed the week before, spent $1 million on a vault, and the people the next week didn't.
That point right there, that was a big point to get, because sometimes I'm like painted as sort of like an industry apologist, and to a degree I am, like, for sure. Yeah. But also it's like, why did they spend so much money? I mean, the industry, what can't be forgotten is that these were startups. Right. And Health Canada was a startup. Right. So it's like they didn't know what they were doing. They were doing the best they could in real time. Yeah. Yeah. And as the valuations ran and things had to get quicker, like, these decisions were being made. So the money was being spent, but it wasn't like it was all being spent on blow. No. It was like, you told me I needed that.
Right. You told me I needed that. That's on the Health Canada side. And investors really were demanding, how are you getting ready for legalization? What is your capacity going to be? What kind of products are you putting out? And so they had like several masters, but those were the key ones.
Oh man. Again, I just keep pumping this Star story because I just put it in today, but it's like, for John Fowler, who started Supreme, and that was once over $1 billion. Oh, yeah. And he's great. But he's like, you were irresponsible. If you wanted to just be a Canadian weed company and sell weed in Canada and just grow good weed, that was irresponsible as a CEO of a Canadian cannabis
especially
company.
Public. Yeah. It's interesting because I remember very early days, I was in New Brunswick and legalization had started, but you couldn't get 7 Acres, which was John Fowler's consumer-facing brand, here. Like, it wasn't in stores yet, and once it was like sold out, but they had it at the New Brunswick Cannabis Store, whatever it's called. And so I was like, I was like, I got it. I had to go to New Brunswick, but I got it. It was like a big deal.
No, dude, I did a piece for the Globe with Fowler, and like we went to the stores and he couldn't get it in Toronto, right by his place on Ossington. Yeah. We couldn't get it, So it's funny. Like,
it's funny. So talk about sort of like when people read the book, and I hope they absolutely do, and we'll put a link about how to get it and order it and get it. Yes, please. It helps Ben, but also it helps provide context to what happened, and then even what is happening, I think, now in the cannabis industry here, but also hopefully instructive lessons to other markets too. Like, talk about sort of give us some nuggets from the book that you think people will find most compelling.
I mean, certainly what people will find compelling, is there was always kind of like a rush to get stuff done and get stuff out of there. And then the goalposts kept getting pushed back. So it'd be like everything but again, you could almost excuse it. Again, not to be an apologist, but it's like, the brick and mortar stores, like, for instance, was the big one. So the idea being that you would go not buy it off the OCS website, not buy cannabis in Ontario from the OCS website, but actually go to a store. People like going to stores to buy. It's a retail. I mean, but it kept getting pushed back.
Yes.
And then I think for all of Ontario, for a while, we had 4 stores.
5, yeah.
Yeah. 5.
I remember it was open April 1st or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was supposed to be opened, 6 months before that. And it kept getting, and then because it was when Doug Ford came in, he changed it. He changed the policy. So like, again, I do feel like an apologist. So I don't want that to be a theme, because the book is hard on these companies and hard on the guys. Like Bruce Linton, who started Canopy, is kind of the main character. And it's like, I mean, I just try to tell the story, not for better or worse, like as honestly as I could. But it's like, I guess I can understand. And same thing with edibles, because everybody thought, or everybody, but Deloitte was saying that like Cannabis 2.0 would bring in the soccer moms. So something like edibles or gluten-free edibles or vapes or even drinks, like, if you could have a cannabis white claw with like 2 milligrams and Superette, a store that looked like
sip and smoke, right?
Oh yeah, that place down there on Dundas. Like, but you would think that like that they would change the game and it would look like an Apple store and all that. But the deadlines for Health Canada approvals kept getting pushed back. Right. So it's like they would rush to get all these projects made. And since you're rushing to get the stuff, sometimes it's kind of crappy. Like those original edibles kind of tasted like weed. Like,
and the original drinks were
it didn't taste good. But they rushed to do it because they thought the soccer moms would come, because they thought the soccer moms would come to Superette, but then they never did.
Right. And then the trickle up or trickle down was sometimes slow, sometimes fast. But I want to sort of not fast forward, but now it's where we are now, right? Where my neighborhood, your neighborhood, like I think the number of dispensaries is right sizing, right? Okay. There is still an illicit market that has storefronts, certainly in my neighborhood. And I feel like the same cycle, and you sort of are an observer of what's happening in the States too, the same cycle happens every single time. Like, will the industry learn at some point?
I mean, but I don't think this is just specific to cannabis. No. I think this is like capitalism writ large.
Yeah, okay.
Like you're going to always see that, it's like, here's a way to make money. Great, let's all do it. 4 people did it and made money. Okay, here comes 100.
4,000, right?
Yeah, and then it slowly diminishes. So I think that happened in cannabis. I mean, it's still wild to me how the illegal dispensaries are able to run like that, just like the mushroom places. Like that came up overnight. Yeah. And now it's like, because you would never see a place to buy hallucinogenic mushrooms. And now I'm like, there's like 6 around.
Oh yeah, there's a ton. There's one right there.
You could forgive a citizen for not knowing whether or not this stuff is legal. Right. So it's like
people still think cafe is legal.
Dude, how there could my book is great. One thing, I'm not saying my book is great. I'm saying my stuff on cafe. You read 4 pages. My stuff, dude,
but they were good 4 pages.
Dude, but
I want an actual copy. That's what I'll get today, and then I'll read it.
The police.
We'll have you back.
But I got the police. Everything about cafe. I've got really good cafe.
Okay.
So everybody knows cafe was like a big, notorious sort of illegal dispensary. And that was the one that in Ontario, they put these big concrete blocks in front of to bar you from getting in, it was front page on the Star. It was on CNN. Yeah. I mean, this was like,
I had a post about it on Twitter that got like 2 million views.
I mean, it was the craziest. I mean, I can't wait for Netflix. If you guys are watching, please turn this into a movie. I don't need any money, but it's like, it was so bizarre. Like,
it was
that's
weird.
What I hope the book tries to capture somehow.
There was weird things going on. Yes.
But Jay, here's what's insane. So that was, you put a tweet up and it got 2 million followers, whatever. And it's like, those guys are still open.
I know.
Like what more? And the cop talks to me in the book, the guy who got the bulldozer to put the thing in front of it. And he's like, you know what? And this is his quote in the book, so help me God, I think cafe just had more money than we did.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, but damn, the illegal dispensary had more money than the police. On record, he said to me, that's what's up. And they just won. And it's over.
Right.
And it's over. They win.
And this is we were talking about it before. I talked to Raj Grover, who's the CEO of High Tide in Las Vegas, talking about some of the challenges here in Canada. I sort of asked him what some of the big challenges are. And illicit storefronts in particular are annoying, I think was the word he used, because like they're storefronts, like they're, where they are.
Yeah, it boggles the mind. So again, some of these things too, where it puts like everything about the whole thing is sort of surreal. Like it's surreal that Canopy was worth $22 billion. That Hexo was worth $5 billion. Is surreal.
Before any of them ever sold a product.
Exactly.
I mean, that's impatience, but not like.
No, yeah. So that like is just like mind boggling. Yeah. But so is the stores. Yeah. Like so is the idea of having concrete. When they put the concrete blocks in front of the cafe bud tenders just put up lawn chairs and just kicked it. Yeah. And they just sat right there.
With a computer and ordering system and their point of sale and like. the guy would come around, give you your weed, and you'd leave.
It's unbelievable. So it's like the whole thing is sort of like, again, I mean, that goes in a movie. I tried to write it like a movie, but it's like, it is bananas. And it's cool that I was the one that like got to put this down on paper first.
Yeah.
Because it was a weird time.
It was a weird time, but it seemed weird in real time, but it seems almost more surreal in hindsight, if that's even possible.
It's like what you said when you described the COVID thing, how we met in line trying to get our vaccines to go to Vegas, because it was like, you can remember it and you lived it.
But it seems like a foggy.
But it's like, wow, that was so crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And what's more that it was so crazy is because a lot of the times you're stoned, it's weed. So it's kind of like, I'm not saying I'm not like reading the Hexo financials with a blunt in my mouth, but I am saying that, the lifestyle associated, like the New Strike party, here's a great story. And Jay Wilger from New Strike is going to be at the thing tonight.
Okay.
I love him, and his stuff in the book is hilarious about dealing with the hip. But and that the weed that Gord Downey had, like before he died, was probably Jay's stuff that he smuggled out of his grow house. Met Gord and his brother at a Tim Hortons down the block, and like threw weed in his car, and then like a month later, Gord died.
Right.
It's like that too. Is like, you remember when?
Totally.
Where was I going with that?
Well, that's that whole story. Well, that New Strike was initially a mining company. They took over the publicly traded part. They started a company and then sold it before.
Didn't even change its name.
But the hip was the one that made they like the hip added their name, and then they got sold, and then there was never any hip weed.
It was that up weed.
Right.
But I remember that was when I was like, wow, buy the ticket, take the ride, because Jay had a party at a campsite like in Creemore. Did you go to that?
No.
And everybody was in yurts, and it was like right after Gord died. And it's like, if you wanted to interview the surviving members of the hip, you had to go to Jay's thing. And it was like glamping. And I'll never forget for the life of me, because I was out there and I was like, wow, there's the hip. And and not only that, just like with the cannabis guys originally, they were so accessible. Like the hip, were like, there was like a fire, and they were up there all night long, just standing there.
The actual camera is on the This Is Our Life book on hip, which is, by the way, amazing. I want to recommend your book. I'd also recommend that book because it's amazing.
Get that book. I mean, but it was so amazing. And I just remember, like, it was just like, I was like, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I remember so clearly, because someone gave me an edible, and this was before this stuff was legal, but like, obviously there's cannabis people around, and then we went into like a barn, and they were playing the hip, and we were doing yoga, and I was like, wow. And the edible kicked in. I'm doing yoga. This is the best.
Yeah, it's like Canadian kid's dream.
This is the best.
Let me ask you a question. You talked about sort of, obviously, the cannabis industry. You talked about sort of this is capitalism writ large.
Yeah.
Has following this made you, you also said you're an optimist or an apologist even. Has it made you more skeptical of sort of other industries or other markets or anything sort of CEOs say? Or like when you say like, oh, New York, they say they're going to be a multi-billion-dollar market within a year, you're like, that's just not.
I mean, it's their job to do that. I mean, that's what, so it's like, you have to have a degree of skepticism. I mean, or else you're just like so naive. One of the things that people got wrapped up in, I think, because it's like they liked smoking pot. So the idea of investing in it, when pot got hot, it was liquid. Terry Booth, like Aurora was liquid. Yeah. I'm on Reddit, I'm on Robinhood, and I smoke weed. And it's like, this is, it's a perfect storm. But I would think a healthy bit of skepticism about any of this stuff or anything. Like, obviously I want people to, I'm talking about my book. Like, don't listen to me, man. If I tell you my own book is good, well,
no, that's sure. No, it's interesting because I was new to the industry. I think it was a new industry, right?
Yeah.
And so what everybody said, you sort of took it at face value.
Deloitte, yeah.
Yeah, like when Deloitte is saying similar things.
Yeah.
And there was this push to actually make it seem very rosy because these companies were publicly traded. Like there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And it was a very surreal time. And that's why it's helpful that someone like you sort of got it down.
And no one knew. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's like, could the soccer mom? Because why did White Claw work and like whatever Hexo? And then Hexo would like hook up with Coors, and it's like, wow, okay,
great
slam dunk.
Well, I would suggest, and this is let's that it actually can and does, but not in the way you have to go into a dispensary to buy it necessarily. Because in places like Minnesota, or even places that's not legal but do have hemp-derived THC beverages, they do fly off the shelves. It's just the channels where you actually have to buy them are not Like,
I love that, dude. I was saying the exact same thing on BNN, and I was like, "There's no."
You're great on BNN. People love it.
Thanks, man. I love.
Well, you brought some life
to
BNN.
I feel like this is better. Hey, but like, yo,
well, yeah, you don't have to go anywhere.
But here's the thing. You couldn't get it at grocery stores, but you couldn't get beer in grocery stores.
That's right.
And then once you do it, it's like no one even cares.
Right.
Like what's
we have like corner store. I just saw it, 7-Eleven, $1.99 for a tall boy, which seems expensive if you're American, but like here, like, oh my God, it's less than $2 a tall boy.
There is no reason though why you shouldn't be able to get a cannabis drink at a bar, at the grocery store, at the gym. I mean, my family lives in Texas, Austin, Texas, and you can get CBD at the gym. I mean, that was what Bruce had in mind.
Yeah.
He didn't, when you can get CBD at the gym and Kirsten Bell is the brand owner of it, it's like, that's a value prop. What could that be worth? I mean,
So it wasn't so much that you can't get that audience to get those products. It's the channels to actually buy them. And I think that, and this is what we see. Minnesota is a good example, right? You can get hemp-derived THC beverages at breweries on tap, in cans, at restaurants, at corner stores. Yes, at gas stations too. But if consumers want it, they're going to get it anyway. It's how do you get this to the rest of the world? And that's where we are today.
And that's what everybody says, that like, that it's like, we didn't necessarily do it wrong. It's just a lot of the people that say like, we're in the third inning.
Right.
Like it's so hard to imagine because everything was so intense and so big and fast and so much.
We haven't even made it to the first intermission. We're going to keep it as a Canadian analogy.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, because we will, when we do get there, and when it's only like, there's not 4,500 SKUs, but like with banks, what is there, like 4 banks in Canada? So it's like, okay, so there's 4 weed companies in Canada. Then it's going to sort of right size.
Yeah. Well, Ben, good luck at the launch tonight. You're going to be at El Macambo, which also, like, I think we've dropped every Canadian. Yeah. Oh, we haven't talked about Wayne Gretzky, but El Macambo is a historic music venue in Toronto, right behind my in-laws' house, actually. They live on Oxford, which is right just south of college there. Maybe they will. El Macambo tonight. Catch a Fire. What's the rest of the title? I have it up.
The Blaze and Bust of the Canadian Cannabis Industry.
Yeah, you had to get that in there.
I
like it. I couldn't fit it on the screen here, but I do like it. Kudos to you for the book, for the insight, for your energy, and good luck tonight.
Thanks for having me on the show, dude.
Thanks, man. You got it. See everybody tomorrow.